Hey guys, it's Kevin and this is my review for Shameless, Season 5, Episode 8, Uncle Carl. And I really was not looking forward to this episode because if you guys didn't know, I hated last week's episode. Well, not hated, but like a lot of it I did not like whatsoever. So this episode I was hoping would be better. And overall, how was this episode? Definitely better than last week. Did it still have its problems? Yes, it had one huge problem, and and it's still the same problem as last week's plot, which I will get into. But for the most part, this episode was really, really good, actually, and definitely one of the stronger ones. No, it was not as good as episode 6. Episode 6 is still the best episode of the season. It's an amazing episode. But this was definitely better than episode 7 or episode 4. Those are, I think, are the two worst episodes of the season. This was definitely up there with the good ones because this one had some really good stuff, especially with the main plot, Ian's plot. Ian's plot was by far the best part of this episode because not only was it dramatic, but it had some of the funniest moments I think we've seen from Debbie's character in a while. And let's just get into this episode. So, Ian in this episode has returned from the psych ward, and he's understandably met with a certain amount of, you know, they're all kind of worried about him. They're happy to have him home, obviously, because I mean, he's their family. They're obviously happy to have him home, but at the same time, they're very worried about him because him not taking their because he still has the bipolar and everything, and especially Lip and Fiona. They're the first to see their hollowed brother when they pick him up from the hospital. With Mickey absent, he's actually drinking, and Mickey is going through a lot of shit in this episode, which I will get to. But the doctor informs the siblings that Ian's release is um, contingent beyond taking 3 different medications daily. So once Lip and Fiona escort Ian back to the house, he's greeted warmly by Debbie and Liam before he immediately goes to lay down. Now, Debbie is in charge of his pills because Fiona puts him in charge of that. And Fiona, I like seeing Fiona take charge of the family in this episode because Sammi, I'm just no, I'm sick of Sammi taking care of them. So Fiona wants to get back to taking care of them. I'll get to that when we get more into Fiona's plot, but basically Debbie's in charge of the pills and everything. And also, we do see that her and Derek are getting a lot closer. We saw her punching. We saw her doing more fighting, and she's. We find out that when she fights, she pictures Monica, which is interesting because Ian is like Monica at this point. So he goes right down to sleep with being a major which is a major side effect of the medication apparently. It's just that you fall asleep. So hours later, Carl bursts into the bedroom, accidentally wakes up Ian. He didn't know he was asleep, and I have to say Carl was actually tolerable in this episode. Like, I haven't really been enjoying Carl's character, but he was actually okay in this episode. I thought overall he was good. And he asked Ian a very good question, which I definitely really enjoyed. He asked him what it feels like to be crazy. And this reveals that he thinks he might actually be a little bit crazy himself, considering, his crazy behavior. And Carl does do his part to try and help Ian, I should say. Because there's actually a part where he throws a toaster into the pool because Ian needs shock therapy. Ian is wallowing listlessly, and he bounds downstairs after his nap. Not much happens really in that conversation. He doesn't really tell him anything. And this is when things just get crazy here. Because Debbie's distracted. She is texting Derek. She is completely distracted by him. And I really do like their relationship, but if she's going to get distracted by him, then I don't think Debbie should be in a relationship. Because, I mean, that really is not surprising that Debbie was distracted because that's what Debbie cares about the most. I mean, the things that Debbie is care about the most are sex, relationships. I mean, that's what she cares about the most. So she doesn't notice that Ian walks in the kitchen and grabs his pill bottles, emptying them out in one swoop. He empties out every single one, and when Debbie finally does take notice, Ian's gone, and so are all of his pills, and she's freaking out here. Emma Keeney's acting in this episode was amazing, I have to say. This is probably some of the best acting we've seen from her in a long time. By far her best performance this season. She was amazing in this scene. She rushes outside. She has no idea where Ian is. I mean, anything could happen to him, especially when you have someone with bipolar disorder. That's scary. I mean, just knowing that he has this bipolar disorder and not knowing where he is, that is legitimately scary, I have to say. So she's rushing outside to find Ian. He's smoking a cigarette, and she asks him why he flushed them down, and we get to probably the saddest scene in the episode because what he says I just love. He says, I didn't take them because they make me feel awful. Like, life is not worth living. I feel so much better knowing that they're gone. And it's just another side effect of the pills. It makes him it's another side effect of his bipolar disorder. It makes him very depressed and things like that. And it really, Debbie really can see now that this is really hurting him. And just her performance in the next scene, oh my god, this was genuine emotion. I love this. She's in tears. She's rushing to Fiona at the restaurant to let her know. They immediately head to the pharmacy. She tells Fiona what happened, and she's just crying her eyes out. They immediately head to the pharmacy. The doctor's not refilling the prescription without a prescription, which is bullshit, but I guess that's how they do things. So, I would never know. I've never been to a psych ward. I would never know that stuff. So, Fiona's well-reasoned plea. Fiona confronts Ian about the pills. Sternly, I like what she said to him. I do like how she said it, because she wasn't rude about it, but she was very stern. Very motherly, like she's always been. So she calls it a full-on Monica move, which it really is. That is totally something that Monica would do, and that really strikes a nerve with Ian, because he doesn't agree with his diagnosis, and this really makes him upset. He said, "You pulled some," and I like what he says to Fiona, that she did some pretty serious shit last year, and that didn't make her like Monica. No one tried to turn on her. And Fiona says she went to jail for it, and Ian says that he did too, and now he's out, and he's not Monica anymore. He's not Monica any more than she is. And I like that he said that he cared about Yevi. The reason he kidnapped Yevi is because he loves Yevi. Yevi, he cares about her, and he loves Yevi. I mean, he does, and he wants to provide for Yevi, and he tried to, he really does care about Yevi. And I like that you tried to tell Fiona this, because you actually really makes you care more for Ian. While they've been portraying him as this crazy person, you have to understand that to Ian, he doesn't think there's really anything wrong with him. And I kind of do see his point there, that Fiona's kind of being a little bit hypocritical. I mean, she was in jail, and this did not happen to her. Yeah, she was in jail, but no one really turned against her. No one thought of her as a bad person. In fact, I can remember in season 4, they wanted to get her out of jail. They wanted to help her out. They really did. I mean, yeah, they were pissed at what happened with Liam, but it wasn't like Ian, because everyone's constantly worried about Ian. That wasn't the case for Fiona. But I think the thing is that Fiona's a very strong woman, and I don't think Ian is as strong as Fiona. I think that's why everyone's so concerned, because Fiona is very strong, and Ian's not. So Fiona's very frustrated by this. She goes inside and she finds out that Debbie has gone out to buy drugs, so she runs to Gus, and Debbie, meanwhile, has gone to Mickey's house, and this, again, another amazing scene. All the best scenes this episode include Debbie. They were just amazing. And it really shows why I think after this episode, this just proves that Debbie's my favorite character, I have to say. Debbie is officially my favorite character, definitely. I mean, just after this episode, yes, Debbie's my favorite character. She begs him to find new pills before turning the conversation to Mickey's drinking, and I like what she says to him, that Frank and Monica used to fight all the time, and they used to have these angry fights, and Frank would angry drink, and she does not want the same thing to happen to Mickey. And she says to Mickey, you can't drink him away, and she warns him about that, and it really does make Mickey think, and I really love that she said that, because Mickey should be careful. I mean, what could happen to him has a lot of bad consequences, especially anyone would know, especially Debbie. Debbie would know what she's talking about. Debbie knows what she's talking about, and I really do love that. So she goes off to her next plan, which is faking a psychotic. This is a hilarious scene. She's pretending she's this psychotic breakdown in the hospital in demand of lithium, and she's like, I'm seeing knives, oh my god. Like, it's a hilarious scene. It's probably the funniest scene we've had this season, I have to say. I was laughing hysterically in this scene. This scene was legitimately hilarious. I loved it, and I think just the way they did that scene was so funny. But obviously, it doesn't work, because one, Debbie's not very convincing here. Two, she realizes that the guy's not going to give her medication unless they take her to like a psych ward and all this stuff, and it was really funny to see, and they don't go through with it. So that's kind of unresolved Ian's pill problem. However, I do like the way this concluded, because Ian's in bed and Mickey finally arrives and he says he's sorry he's late, climbs onto the bed, holds Ian's head, kisses his forehead, and it's actually the first time that Ian has actually been at peace and not someone after him. And I think it was a good way to end the storyline for this episode, definitely, especially with Ian being at peace. Yeah, the whole medication thing is still there, and they need to figure out what to do there, but everyone's been coming after Ian, and he's so vulnerable in this episode, and I love that they ended it that way, definitely. So My only fear with Debbie now is that she's too into Derek and it's going to get her too distracted. I really like Derek, and I don't want that to happen because I really do like Derek. I mean, we saw him in this episode. He's really a very nice guy. He really is. I mean, he's saying that Debbie's amazing and that she's like the best thing ever, and he really is a great guy for her. He's the perfect guy. He loves her, and just I really hope that she does not get distracted because I want her to be in a relationship. I really care about Debbie and I want her to be in a good relationship, but you never know. You really don't know at this point, so we'll see what happens there. So let's get into Fiona. Fiona's plot I also really enjoyed in this episode. I mean, yes, that the Jimmy stuff was stupid last week, but they don't even focus on that. They focus on Gus here. Now, this was kind of interesting because Gus is going on tour and Fiona's planning on moving back in and just letting him go. She wants to move back in with the Gallaghers, and I can understand why because Sammy's doing a terrible idea, doing a terrible job at that. And what I found interesting about this episode was we find out that not only Sammy wants to stay, wants to come back, but also Lip wants to come back. And everyone thinks it's a bad idea. Sammy and Lip are very vocal about it, and basically, even Sean gives her really good advice. I like what Sean says to her, um, especially because he's so jealous of Fiona and he doesn't really care about her other relationships and he has a crush on her. It was interesting to see him give her legit advice of what she should do with Gus, and he says to her that he suggests groveling, and when she doesn't indulge, he insists that she hasten the end of their marriage. Either fight for this marriage or cut him loose, and it's that simple. She needs to choose something. She can't pick something in the middle. So Fiona decides to embark on she goes on the brief mission to find pills for Ian. She finds out Debbie has gone to buy drugs for herself, so she takes off running. She goes to Gus and the band, who coolly receive her, and she reaches Gus and spouts her feelings to him in one giant monologue. She says, "All day today, when everything in my family was falling apart, I just kept wishing you were with me. That's what I know." So you can see that she really does love him, and it really is working out well for them. You can see that, and Gus kisses her, and she thinks all is well. She just needs a few weeks to get Ian in order, and then she'll join them on tour. But Gus laughs. He's saying, it's a terrible idea and everything. And hang on one second, guys. So he says he thinks it was bad for his marriage, her decision to sleep with her ex and everything. And I like that he said that because it was a bad decision for Fiona to do that. And just like that, Fiona knows that there's no chance Gus will come from the road, and there's no chance she'll water his plant. It's basically over between them. It's really sad, but Jimmy fucked up her life once again. It's always Jimmy, and I gotta say this. If Jimmy comes back in your life, don't go towards him. He's gonna fuck you over. Because I'm gonna say this now. All that Jimmy does in Fiona's life is screw her over. Okay, I understand he cares about her. I understand he likes her. I do, and that's great that he likes her. But the thing is, whenever there's someone else in her life, he manages to ruin her life somehow. And I don't know why it is, but whenever he's in her life, he ruins her life. So she needs to really stay away from Jimmy because he's just going to continue ruining her life. So, yeah. So overall, I really enjoyed Fiona's plot, though. It's really sad what happened to Gus. He was the perfect guy for her. He was such a great guy. But because of what she did with Jimmy, they're done for the most part, and she needs to try to figure out what she really wants to do here because they're done. There's no chance that they're getting back together. And it's really sad because Gus really did care about her. And I do like what Gus said to her, though, that they moved way too fast, and they really did, and they need to really think more about this because they didn't think when they got married. They just did suddenly. And I think Gus, yeah, he does care about her, but as I said, their marriage was not going to work out, and they really need to figure out what they want to do here. And their wedding was just their marriage and everything. It was way too impromptu, and I think they're realizing that now. So, let's get into Lip's plot, because I want to talk about the plot I did not like last. So we're going to get into Lip's plot now, which I also really liked. First of all, we still have that really funny thing going on with Amanda and that one girl. I thought that was kind of funny. But, of course, as we know, Lip's tuition money, they're piling up, but luckily he has an idea. He approaches Kev to gauge his interest in resuming their weed business between the packed dorms, Fraternity Pledge Week, and Lip's status as an RA. He sees the opportunity to seize the seller's market and convince Kev to come resume their ice cream truck drug ring, which I think is actually a pretty good idea, because, I mean, that would get him the money that he'd have for this. But, of course, as I said, why doesn't he turn to Amanda? He doesn't turn to Amanda because, of course, that whole thing with that girl, and I think also because Amanda, I think the reason he doesn't turn to Amanda is because Amanda has that whole thing with that one girl who thinks she's a lesbian and everything, and she really can't do anything right now. So Kev is reluctant to leave his, the twins and everything, but he decides, because, he really does care about them, wants to be a good father to them and everything, but he decides to indulge the plan for the sake of making money for his daughters. So he moves into a spare room in the dorm and begins rolling joints with Lip, and almost immediately they clean out their supply at the frat houses while playing beer pong and selling blunts left and right. So he brings the cash to. Now, while this was kind of silly, I have to say, I love how this plot ended. I love what Lip said. I think it was very well done and really sums up how much Lip has changed and how much I love his character. He really is a great character. He goes to the financial office, but the staffer asks if Lip would just consider just taking the semester off instead. And he explains why he can't go home. Because he never left because of his guilt, that he's not there to take care of Ian. Because he wasn't there. He didn't get a chance, he's not going to get a chance to take care of Ian. He hasn't gotten a chance to help out his family. And he wants to help out these kids. That's why he's doing the RA services. Because he thinks that he can help out the kids, and the only way to take care of his family is by staying in school. So it's just such a great scene. I have to say that scene was just amazing and probably one of my favorite Lip scenes because it just shows how much his character has changed, and I love that scene. Definitely, he did a very good job with that scene. Whoever plays Lip did an amazing job, and that was a great scene. However, despite him being so passionate about this, he only manages to buy himself a week's extension on the tuition before he's forced to drop out. So, Lip really, something needs to happen. The only person to turn to now is Amanda. I'm going to say that now. The only other person he can turn to is Amanda, and Amanda needs to supply him with money somehow. I know she has a whole thing with that girl going on, but somehow Lip needs to get this money. Okay, after that whole speech, I really, really want this to work out well for Lip. I don't want him to have to go through this again. I think Lip is a very, very good character. And just, I love what they're doing with Lip's character. I mean, he's become so much more responsible. And part of it's because of Amanda, because she made him responsible, but also because of him being in that position in the family that he wants to come home. And I kind of feel like when he does come home, that him and Fiona are going to clash a little bit because they both want to sort of take care of the family. So we'll see what happens there. But I really love that plot, and I think that was also very well done. So yeah, I really like that. So now we're going to talk about Kev and V's plot, which I partially really liked it, and then some of it I thought was really stupid. It's not the thing I didn't hate the most this episode, though. So Kev, of course, is missing his kids, and he calls Svetlana to inquire about V, and by proxy to Bar, the message gets slightly muddled, though, and Svetlana doesn't tell V that she's supposed to bartend that night, so it doesn't work exactly. So it's kind of funny, actually, what ends up happening here. We do see that V is also trying to figure out, of course, did she want to go back to Eddie Murphy, did she want to go to Kev, and Svetlana has instead gone to give V the same treatment she gave Kev last week, and that is oral pleasure. Now, that was just weird when Svetlana went up to V, but to me it just seemed like V just being desperate. I mean, V just so desperate to get sex somehow. However, we do see that, yeah, she does have limits in this episode. She does have limits, and there are things that which I like. I like that she still has limits because I didn't think she did. And she decides to go on a date with Eddie Murphy. And basically, she set up a date, but I like what Fiona says to her. Fiona actually gives her very good advice. She tells V that she's not going to help her unless she tries to fix things with Kev, because they have fixed things in the past, and they've had other things, which is true. Fiona's saying they've had huge things in the past. They've had big fights, but they've all just been funny. They've all just been funny, and they've gone through them, and they've been fine with them. So why all of a sudden are they struggling now? I think because they didn't realize how hard being parents is going to be, and also because the fact that V is just not good with being a mother. So I understand that Fiona's saying that, but what Fiona needs to understand is that they just can't go through this. But I have to agree with Fiona saying that they need to understand that they can fix this, and V does realize this because she goes on a date with Eddie Murphy, and Eddie Murphy turns out to be very flirty and just wants her for sex, and she's done with him. She takes off. So she decides to not go through with the date because basically she shrugs him off and goes home to call Kev, but it's too late. He's asleep, naked in bed with a sorority girl, and he's now moved on, and it's really sad. And you see the look on V's face, like, what the hell did I do? And you feel really bad for her. You genuinely feel bad for her, and I love that. So V and Kev, their relationship is pretty much over. It really is. It's really sad, but they did it to themselves. I mean, V did at least. So they really need to figure out what they want to do here because they've now done the equal cheating and it's gone beyond that. So Yeah, so let's get to my one problem in the episode. Sammi and Frank. You guys know how much I hated this plot last week. And unfortunately, it did not get better this week. Partially, it did. Carl and Chucky, I thought this was good. But what ends up happening, I thought was absolutely ridiculous. Of course, I didn't think we'd continue the whole Frank and Sammy stuff, but we do, because basically now that Carl's this drug dealer, he's now moving up the ranks, thanks to one drug runner getting shot. He's now promoted. So his first big job is to do a running to Michigan, but Carl's visibly nervous about the whole situation because he doesn't know if it's really going to go well. And he has Frank for advice and accompaniment, but under Sammy's stern eye. So Frank refuses to act out. So after Sammy shot him last week, Frank knows that the best way to get Sammy out of his life is to smile and nod his head at whatever crazy she throws at him, even if it means being treated like a dog, and not even just being treated like a dog. So I mean, Sammy's crazy, but again, I hate the way they're writing her, and I just want her off the screen. Every time we see Sammy now, I want her off the screen. If they're going to keep writing her as a psychopath, there's a scene where Frank talks about a psychopath and just some slutty girl. And it was a ridiculous scene, and it just made me think, you know what? Why are they writing Sammy like this? Because let me say something. Sammy genuinely cared for Frank last year. She was never a psychopath. What Sammy seemed to me was that she was just very clingy and wanted that time back with Frank. Now they're writing her as a psychopath. I can understand that she really misses Frank, but again, a couple episodes back, she was talking about how she wanted nothing to do with Frank. So why all of a sudden does she want something to do with Frank? It doesn't make sense. It's out of character, and I hate this plot. I legitimately hate it, and they need to stop. Because if they continue this plot, then I'm not gonna like this show. And everything else that's going on in the show I love, but this is just stupid. What they're doing with it is ridiculous. So basically, to get Sammy away from him, Frank comes up with this great plan that Carl uses Chucky as a mule on the Michigan Army. So if you remember, Carl made that promise to Chucky that he would help him with those bullies if he become basically his personal slave. So he tapes heroin to Chucky in order to keep his mouth shut, but at the bus station, Carl has barely bought the tickets when the two drug-sniffing police dogs enter the lobby. In classic Carl fashion, he bolts, leaving Chucky to be arrested. So it turns out that Frank actually placed an anonymous concerned citizen's phone call to the cops, tipping them off about drugs at the bus station. Now, this to me just felt like when Frank screwed over Fiona with that whole unfit family thing. That's what that felt like to me. And it seemed just like a ripoff of that. This seemed just really ridiculous. I understand he was trying to get Sammy away from him, but there are so many other things Frank could have done, and you have to integrate Carl's plot with this. I understand Carl's the only one that actually still hasn't bailed on Frank completely, but I just don't like the way they intertwine that plot. I thought it was dumb. So that's not the worst part of this episode, though. Because the plan, of course, backfires. Because Sammy starts talking about how upset she is with Chucky, but then she realizes that she actually turned the police on to Carl. And the entire Gallagher family is home, tossing blame when the cops arrive. Carl flees. Sammy immediately points them towards Carl's direction. He runs and runs. He's like, "Don't shoot, I'm white." They arrest him, and he's taken to the police station. The cops inform Fiona and family that Carl's interrogation might take a few hours. Everyone leaps to their feet, yelling to Carl not to say anything, and he's like, "I want a fucking lawyer, motherfucker." And he says gleefully the detective has a huge pile of drugs is laid out in front of him, and it is just ridiculous. Like, it's legitimately ridiculous. Carl's arrested, great, whatever, I don't care. I legitimately don't care about that plot. I don't care what happens to Sammy. I want Sammy to get killed off. I'm not kidding. If they're going to write Sammy this way, I want her killed off. I do. I don't want to see Sammy as this dumb person, as a psychotic bitch. I don't want to see her that way. I want to see her as a sympathetic daughter who's caring for Frank and has limits and wants nothing really to do with him. Because that whole conversation with Debbie, what did that, like, Debbie had that whole conversation with her, now they just, like, threw it out the window. They really did, and it's ridiculous. So overall, guys, besides that plot, I really enjoyed this episode. I did, but that was just stupid. And luckily, that wasn't the main plot, though. The main plot was Ian, which I was very happy about. So Ian and his medication, they need to figure out what they really want to do there with Ian and his medication. Are they going to give it to him? How is he going to get it? I mean, he needs to get it somehow, so they need to figure out what's going to happen there. Fiona and Gus, unfortunately, that relationship's over. I think Fiona's going to try to fix it somehow, but I feel like it's just kind of too late. Same for Kev and V. I kind of feel like they also are just kind of too late. Debbie, my only main concern with her, as I said, is I hope she does not get distracted with Derek. I hope that those two find a way to have a relationship and not get distracted by each other, because it just seems like they're going to get distracted. Lip and college, definitely he needs to figure out a way to get that money. I don't know how he's going to do it, but he needs to figure out a way to get it, and I want your guys' opinion on this whole Sammi storyline. Like, do you guys think it's as stupid as I do? Because I legitimately think it's the stupidest thing ever. I really do. I think it's dumb that they're writing her this way. I think it's ridiculous that they're writing her this way, and I think overall it's dumb. I'm happy the episode didn't focus on that because I really enjoyed the episode. And if they would have focused on that, I would have absolutely hated this episode because I hate that plot. I think it's stupid. But overall, guys, this is my review. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you guys saw this episode. Overall, guys, I really enjoyed the episode minus Sammy's plot. Just kill off Sammi, and I'll be fine. Chucky is... I'm sick of Chucky. I'm going to be honest. I'm sick of Chucky. I really am. Chucky's annoying. Sammy's annoying. Get them off the show. I'll be fine with that. I'll see you guys in my next video, which will be my review. Well, hopefully, at least. Because tomorrow, guys, if you guys did not see that announcement video, I have Tech Week next week for my musical, and it usually goes till 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock. Tomorrow's is probably going to be like 10 o'clock, so I don't know what I'm going to be able to review tomorrow, because Originals comes back tomorrow, Bates Motel returns tomorrow, and Better Call Saul is on tomorrow, so I don't know what I'll be able to review tomorrow. I'm going to try to do what I can. If all goes well, my next video will be for my review of the Originals, if all goes well. But we'll see what ends up happening. I'll try to review what I can. I'm just going to tell you guys that my review's not going to be as consistent this week. I'm going to do the best I can, but we'll see what happens. So I'll see you guys for whatever my next video is, because I don't know what it's going to be. But I'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.